Have you ever wondered who the peoples of the United States and the British Commonwealth are identified in the pages of the Bible? If the Bible claims to be the Word of God, then how can it ignore the greatest nations in the world? Well, believe it or not, these nations too are identified in the pages of your Bible and are mentioned more times than any other nations in the Bible. The majority of prophecy is centered on the people called the House of Israel, which means the prophecy is largely referring to the United States of America and the British Commonwealth of Nations and the people of Northwestern Europe. We are the very focal point of all prophecy. When you understand where we are identified, then all Bible prophecy falls into place. Personally, I believe the wicked elites have and are using the events in the Bible to manipulate and confuse people into believing a lie by twisting the truth until the truth is no longer recognizable by the masses. They create chaos and fear to control us. Ultimately, the prophecy will be hard to understand without knowing who the house of Israel is, and no, it's not just Israel of today. And yes, they are Israelites, but not the entire house of Israel mentioned in prophecy. They are part of the house of Israel, known in the ancient times as the house of Judah, the Jewish people. All Jewish people are Israelites, but not all Israelites are Jews. The promise to Abraham was a global promise, handed down to his son, Isaac, from his wife Sarah. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Genesis 13:14-16. This is saying your children, your progeny to follow, will number in the hundreds of millions. This scripture does not portray the small, struggling nation of Israel in the Middle East today. This is not the same description of the Israel prophesied to be the greatest nation the world has ever known. It cannot be talking about the Israel that is surrounded by hostile Arab nations struggling for survival. No, the Israel in the Middle East today is part of the house of Israel, but they are still the kingdom of Judah in God's order, regardless of what man calls it. Jacob said the birthright promise of the scepter would never depart from Judah, and we see this manifest as the house of Judah returned to the land of Canaan. The Jewish people in modern-day Israel today hardly comprise a nation so large or a people occupying all points of the compass that number as the dust of the earth. God promised Abraham's grandson, Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel after he won the struggle with God's angel, that thy seed shall be as dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee, and in thy seed, shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Obviously, this great promise clearly stated that Abraham's children would spread abroad from the ancient land of Canaan, that they would ultimately be found in all directions, north, east, south, west from Canaan. That would be numbered in the countless millions as the dust of the earth in number. This promise has surpassed the limited borders of ancient Canaan. This promise was global. Canaan is the land of the Hebrews. Genesis 40:15. Let's look at the promises that were handed down from Abraham to Isaac and on to Jacob that God renamed Israel, and on to Ephraim and Manasseh and Judah. This is where it gets very interesting. But I have to tell you the story of Joseph first. Jacob had 13 children. In addition to Leah and Rachel, Jacob married Silpa and Bilha, two members of Laban's household. Leah gave him 7 children: Reuben, Simon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and a daughter Dinah. They had 6 sons together and a daughter. Jacob's wife and the love of his life, Rachel, was childless for 7 years of their marriage and finally was blessed with a son, Joseph, and shortly before her death, another son, Benjamin. Jacob's 2 other wives also bore him children. Bilha gave him Dan and Naphtali, and Silpa gave him Gad and Asher. The 12 sons of Jacob were to become the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob loved his second youngest son, Joseph, very much. As a young boy, Joseph had shown his intelligence and his devotion to his father. Joseph was also a very handsome young man. It's not surprising that he was his father's favorite son. Jacob spent much time teaching Joseph everything he had learned from his father Isaac and grandfather Abraham, and Jacob sent Joseph to the academy of Shem and Eber. Joseph grew up to be a very wise and educated man. The brothers were jealous of the favoritism which their father offered Joseph. With fears, they witnessed Joseph's grooming for a much higher position in the family. So the relationship between Joseph and his brothers became strained and resentful. Joseph began to tell his brothers about his dreams, which confirmed his brothers' fears that he would rule over them. Joseph told them of his dream of tying up bundles in the field together with them, and that their bundles had suddenly bowed before his own. On another dream, Joseph told his brothers that the sun and the moon and 11 stars had also paid their respects to him and bowed. Jacob warned Joseph against telling such dreams to his brothers, and told his sons to disregard these dreams, for he did not wish to see the strife among them. In his heart he knew that there was truth in Joseph's dreams, and that Joseph was destined to become a great and powerful ruler. One day Joseph was staying at home with his father, while his brothers were with the flocks near Shechem. For a long time Jacob had no news from his sons, so he sent Joseph to find them. Joseph's brothers saw him coming, because they could not mistake his coat of many colors that their father had given him, and their jealousy was stirred. So they threw him in a pit. Reuben had planned to take him out eventually and return him to his father unharmed, but Reuben went off to assist his father, and when he returned, Joseph was not there, for his brothers had sold him to a passing caravan of Ishmaelite Arab merchants, who were the descendants of Ishmael, son of Abraham, and his wife Hagar. Joseph's brothers soon regretted their action, unable to tell Joseph the truth. So they slaughtered a goat and dipped Joseph's coat in the blood and gave the garment to their father, telling him that they had found it. For many years Jacob mourned the loss of Joseph his son and refused to be consoled. The Ishmaelite Arab merchants sold Joseph to a caravan of Midianites, who were also Arab merchants, the descendants of Midian, a son of Abraham, through his wife Keturah, who brought him to Egypt. And they sold him to Potiphar, who was the chief officer of King Pharaoh's guard. Joseph's extraordinary beauty, wisdom, and fine manners attracted the attention of his master, Potiphar. He recognized the unusual abilities of Joseph and knew that he was no common slave. To make a long story short, Joseph was called to the Pharaoh to interpret his dreams, for God was with Joseph and blessed him with success in everything that he did. Joseph was 30 years old when he appeared before the king Pharaoh. When Pharaoh told him that he had heard of Joseph's great gifts as an interpreter of dreams, Joseph modestly replied that his wisdom was not of his own making but of God. Then Pharaoh related his dreams to Joseph, and Joseph knew at once what God had revealed in the meaning to him. Joseph told Pharaoh that both dreams had the same meaning, and that God wished to tell Pharaoh that he was about to do 7 years of plenty and abundance would come to Egypt, but it would be followed by 7 years of famine, hunger, and hardship, would be so great that the abundance of the preceding years would be completely swallowed up and forgotten. Joseph continued to advise him to find a wise and honest man to oversee and control the land during the 7 years of abundance, so that the plenty of provisions would be stored away for the 7 years of lean to come, to prevent a horrible famine. This description and advice truly impressed Pharaoh and his council. Pharaoh decided that he could not find a better and wiser man than Joseph himself, who was blessed by God with prophetic wisdom. He immediately appointed Joseph to be the governor of Egypt, second only to the king. Joseph was dressed in royal apparel, and the king gave him the royal confirmation ring and a golden chain as tokens of his position. In the royal chariot, Joseph was given an Egyptian name, Zophanath-Pineach. He was led through the land escorted by a royal assembly and messengers who confirmed the new governor and announced his authority. The entire country paid homage to Zophanath-Pineach, and he soon became very popular among the Egyptian people. When famine spread throughout all the lands, people came to Egypt in exchange for food. The people sold their livestock and their land, and by the end of the famine, Pharaoh was in complete control of the entire country, and all the people were his helpers, working for him and dependent on him for their needs. Not only was Egypt hit by famine, also the neighboring countries in Canaan. Many people came from near and far to Egypt to buy provisions. Since only Egypt had prepared for the calamity, naturally Joseph was expected to see his brothers any day, coming to purchase food for Jacob's household. In order to make sure that he would not miss them, he ordered all purchasers of food to register as soon as they entered Egypt. Joseph knew immediately when his brothers arrived in Egypt. Only Benjamin did not come with them. Joseph had his brothers brought before him, but they did not recognize him. Joseph thought of his dreams and of their jealous attitude towards him and decided to test them. Joseph spoke to them harshly. Genesis 42:7. Joseph knew he had to keep one of them in Egypt and send the rest to his father's house with provisions, and to get his brother Benjamin and his father to come to Egypt. So Joseph pretended that he was not convinced of their story, and told his brothers that he would not let them go until one of them went to fetch the youngest brother to prove the truth of their words. Then he had them put in prison. On the third day of their detention, Joseph spoke to his brothers again. He told them that he would not keep them in prison any longer, and that he was going to give them the opportunity to prove their story. But one of the brothers would have to stay until they returned with Benjamin. Simon stayed, and the rest of the brothers returned to Canaan with their provisions. Arriving home, they told their father, Jacob, everything that had happened. Jacob voiced his great distress. Joseph is gone, Simon is not here, and now you want to take Benjamin away. My son shall not go with you. The provisions were used up, and the famine again threatened Jacob's household. Jacob asked his sons to return to Egypt and buy food. Genesis 43:4. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food for you, Judah said. The man warned us repeatedly, saying, you shall not see my face if your brother is not with you. Jacob did not hold back his great fear for Benjamin's safety. And finally, Judah swore with his own life for the safety of Benjamin. Jacob could no longer delay his sons going to Egypt, and permitted Benjamin to go with them. When the brothers appeared before Joseph, and Joseph saw that Benjamin was with them, he told his servants to bring them into the house, and to prepare a meal for them. The man did so. Joseph's brothers were suspicious of the unexpected hospitality. Then he brought Simon to them. Simon told them how well he had been treated, and was thankful, and they all sat down at the table. When Joseph arrived and sat down with them, his brothers gave him the gifts that Jacob had sent to him. Then he welcomed Benjamin, but on seeing his youngest brother, Joseph was overcome with emotion, and had to leave so that his brothers would not see him emotional. Returning to his brothers, Joseph headed the dinner feast, and for the first time since they sold Joseph, his brothers felt happy. Joseph surprised them many times by his familiar knowledge of their personal lives. He seated them accordingly to their age and called them by their names. He pretended to get all this knowledge from his divine cup, which he kept putting up to his ear, as if it were revealing many secrets to him. After the meal, Joseph gave them all presents, and to Benjamin he gave 5 times more. Joseph still wanted to see how much they were willing to sacrifice for one another. After the dinner, he told his supervisor to fill the sacks of his brothers with provisions, and again to put the money on top with his own magic cup he used at dinner, and he ordered it to be put in Benjamin's sack. The man carried out Joseph's orders, and the next morning, unaware of the plot, Joseph's brothers set out for Canaan, happy that everything had gone so well. After they left the city, the supervisor came after them and scolded them for stealing his master's divining cup. He told them they were ungrateful and asked why you would steal what belonged to his master. Well, being innocent, they agreed to have their belongings searched and said that if one of them had stolen the cup, he would die, and that the others would serve as Joseph's slaves. The supervisor said that the thief alone would be held responsible and taken into bondage, and the rest could go home freely. Convinced of their innocence, the brothers unloaded their packs. When Benjamin's sack was opened, the brothers were shocked. There was the cup, laid mute, evidence of a crime they knew Benjamin could not have committed. Tearing their clothes in despair, the brothers decided they would stick together, one for all and all for one. How different they were now from what they were many years earlier when they had turned deaf ears to Joseph's dilemma. All the brothers now returned to Egypt to try to save the innocent Benjamin. When the brothers returned to Joseph, they fell down before him and declared their innocence. They told him they did not understand how such a thing could happen, but that they were ready to be responsible and would all be Joseph's slaves. But Joseph refused their offer and only wanted Benjamin as a slave. The others could return to their father in Canaan. Then Judah stepped forward and begged for Benjamin. Judah also accused the governor of a plot to enslave them from the start. He warned him of the unusual strength that the sons of Jacob had. Cleverly, Joseph replied that his divining cup had already told him that the two of them had destroyed a whole city, that he was not impressed. Then Judah changed his tactics and appealed to Joseph's heart. He told the whole story of Jacob and the 2 beloved sons whom his favorite wife bore, Rachel. Judah told of his father's grief when one of them had disappeared. He said that if they come home without Benjamin, their aged father would never survive the calamity. Finally, Judah offered himself in Benjamin's place, pointing out that he would be of so much more value than Benjamin as a slave. Judah's spirit of self-sacrifice in behalf of his brother ripped Joseph's kind heart apart. He knew that his brothers had changed completely, and that they would rather die than give Benjamin away as a slave. So Joseph could now forgive them for what they had done to him. Joseph could no longer play the hateful role, sending all the Egyptians' associates and attendants out of the room. Joseph, with tears in his eyes, spoke in Hebrew, in a voice shaken with emotion, Genesis 45:3, and said, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" So stunned were his brothers, they could not answer him. Joseph saw their embarrassment and their fear of him, so he put them at ease. He told them not to worry about having sold him as a slave, for it had been God's will to send him to Egypt to save their lives from hunger. Then he asked them to hurry back and to tell Jacob that they had found his lost son Joseph. He asked them to tell their father that despite the many years of absence from home, living in an environment of idolatry and immorality, that he had remained the same Joseph his father had known and loved. Joseph begged for his father to come to Egypt with his entire household, where he would take care of them in Goshen, a jurisdiction in Egypt where other Hebrews and Phoenicians and Armenians could settle and live in peace. and plenty, for the years of famine were not over yet. There he would take care of them. Joseph embraced his brothers, kissed Benjamin, and set them on their way. King Pharaoh welcomed the news of Joseph discovering his lost brothers. He urged Joseph to bring the entire family to Egypt and to give them the best. Joseph sent a whole caravan of wagons for the removal of the family. The brothers hurried home to bring the happy news to their father. Jacob's heart stood still as he heard the wonderful news. He could hardly believe that his beloved Joseph was still alive. Jacob saw the gifts that Joseph sent him and heard the special message Joseph had sent to him, reminding his father of their last scholarly discussion before Joseph disappeared on that fateful day. Jacob knew that Joseph was still alive. Jacob felt like a new man. He was extremely happy and strengthened by the good news, and immediately prepared for the journey to Egypt, for he wanted to see Joseph before he died. Jacob left his native land, Canaan, with his entire household of 70 people, but not before he had visited Beersheba, where he had offered sacrifices to God. Here God appeared to him and told him not to be afraid to go to Egypt, because he would be with him and eventually turn his small family into a great nation. Then he would bring them back from Egypt, and they would settle in the land of Canaan. From Beersheba, Jacob continued his journey to Egypt. He sent Judah before him to make preparations for the arrival of the family, and especially to set up a school and an academy for the children. When Joseph heard that his father was coming, he prepared a big reception. All of Egypt was celebrating the arrival of their governor's father. Joseph himself went to meet his father on the way. When Joseph saw his father from a distance, he stepped down from his royal carriage and ran to greet him. They held each other and shed many tears over their long separation. Finally, Jacob said, "Now that I have seen your face again, I can die in peace." Joseph gave his father and brothers good land in Goshen, where they settled to live in peace and were provided with everything they needed. When the years of famine were over, the land gradually returned to normal. Everyone knew that if not for Joseph, the entire population would have died of starvation. Now let's talk about Joseph's wife, Asenath, Dinah's daughter, who had been brought up in the house of Potiphar. Asenath, the daughter of Dinah, is Jacob's granddaughter. The traditions that trace Asenath to the family of Jacob relate to the daughter born to Dinah, followed by her rape from Shechem, son of Hamor. Jacob's son wanted to kill the infant, but Jacob said no, and Jacob took a gold plate and wrote God's name on it and the event of Shechem and Dinah. Jacob hung the plate around Asenath's neck and sent her away. God dispatched the angel Michael to bring her to the house of Potiphar in Egypt. Dinah left Asenath on the wall of Egypt on the day Potiphar went out for a walk near the wall with his young men, and he heard the infant crying. When they brought the baby to him, he saw the plate and the record of the event of her birth and the history. Potiphar told his servants, "This girl is the daughter of great ones." He brought her to the home and gave her a wet nurse. Potiphar's wife was barren, and she raised Asenath as her own daughter. Therefore she was called Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, for she was raised in the home of Potiphar and his wife, as if she were their own daughter. Each of Jacob's sons were born with a future wife, except for Joseph. He was not born with his betrothed. Since Asenath, daughter of Dinah, was fit to be his wife, which was Joseph's niece, God directed matters so that Joseph would find a wife when he went to Egypt. And Asenath was suitable for him. That's in the Midrash Aggadah 35-37, Genesis 41-45. You can read the account of the rape and the defilement of Dinah in Genesis 34. And this is where Simon and Levi slaughtered Hamor and Shechem and took Dinah out of the house of Shechem. Asenath bore Joseph 2 children, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Joseph's father settled in Goshen, Joseph sent his 2 sons to the academy to be instructed in the knowledge of God. Jacob lived in Goshen for 17 years, and he felt that his end was near. He had Joseph swear to not bury him in Egypt, but to take him back to Canaan and lay him to rest with his fathers in the cave of Machpelah. Soon after, Joseph was told that his father was seriously ill. So Joseph took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and went to see his father Jacob. Jacob was lying on his sickbed. Now let's review the transferring scripture of the birthright in Genesis 48, 3-22. And Jacob said to Joseph, Almighty God appeared to me in Luz, in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. And he said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and cause you to multiply, and I will make you into a congregation of peoples. And I will give you this land to your seed and your seed after you for an everlasting inheritance. And now as for your 2 sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, until I came to you to the land of Egypt, they are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine like Reuben and Simon. This is where they became the 13th tribe of Israel, them both as one. But your children, if you beget any after them, shall be yours by their brothers' names. They shall be called into their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died to me in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still a stretch of land to come to Ephraim, and I buried her there on the way to Ephraim, which is Bethlehem. Now Israel saw Joseph's sons, and he said, Who are these? And Joseph said to his father, These are my sons whom God gave me here. So he said, Now bring them near to me, so that I may bless them. Now Israel's eyes had become heavy with age, to the extent that he could not see. So he drew them near to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I had not expected to see even your face, and behold, God has shown me your children too. And Joseph took them out from upon Jacob's knee, and he prostrated himself to the ground. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim at his right, which is from Israel's left, and Manasseh at his left, which would be from Israel's right, and he brought them near to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and placed it upon Ephraim's head, although he was the younger, and his left hand he placed upon Manasseh's head. He guided his hands deliberately, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked with God, who sustained me as long as I am alive until this day, may the angels who redeemed me from all harm bless the youths, and may they be called by my name and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they multiply abundantly like fish in the midst of the land. And Joseph saw that his father was placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it displeased him, so he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head, to place it on Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, Not so, father, for this is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused, and he said, I know, my son, I know he too will become a people, and he too will be great. But his younger brother will be greater than he, and his children's fame will fill the nations. So he blessed them that day, saying, With you Israel will bless, saying, May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. And he placed Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I am going to die, and God will be with you, and he will return you to the land of your forefathers. And I have given you one portion over your brothers, which I took from the land of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. Now concerning Jacob's prophecies about each of his sons was a brief description of them, with the exception of Judah and Joseph. For these two tribes, his instructions are detailed and specific. He warned his children to keep together and to remain faithful in their belief in God. What Jacob was saying for days to come are the prophecies of the end time or the last days are very explicit. Genesis 49, 1 through 28. Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather, and I will tell you what will happen to you at the end of days. Gather and listen, sons of Jacob, and Israel, to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength and my first of my might. You should have been superior in rank and superior in power. You have the restlessness of water, therefore you shall not have superiority, for you extended upon your father's couch, then you profaned it. Who extended upon my bed? Simon and Levi are brothers, stolen instruments are their weapons. Let my soul not enter their council, my honor. You shall not join their assembly, for in their wrath they killed a man, and with their will they hamstrung a bull. Cursed be their wrath, for it is mighty, and their anger because it is harsh. I will separate them throughout Jacob, and I will scatter them throughout Israel. Judah, as for you, your brothers will acknowledge you. Your hand will be at the nap of your enemies, and your father's sons will prostrate themselves to you. A cub and a grown lion is Judah. From the prey, my son, you withdrew. He crouched, rested like a lion, and like a lion, who will rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, or the student of the law from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. That's the kingdom. And to him will be a gathering of peoples. He binds his foal to a vine, and to a tendril he binds his young donkey. He launders his garment with wine, and with the blood of grapes binds his raiment. He is red-eyed from wine, and white-toothed from milk. Zebulun will dwell on the coast of the seas. He will be at the harbor of ships, and his boundary will be at Zidon, which is Lebanon. Issachar is a bony donkey lying between the boundaries. He saw a resting place that it was good, and the land that it was pleasant. And he bent his shoulder to bear burden, and he became an indentured laborer. Dan will avenge his people like one, the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent on the road, a viper on the path, which bites the horse's heels, so its rider falls back, a great sly warrior. For your salvation I hope, O Lord. As for Gad, a troop will troop forth from him, and it will troop back in its tracks. From Asher will come rich food, and he will yield regal delicacies. Naphtali is a swift gazelle. He is one who utters beautiful words. A charming son is Joseph, a son charming to the eye of the women. Each one strode along to see him. They heaped bitterness upon him and became quarrelsome. Archers despised him, but his bow was strongly established, and his arms were guided from the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there he sustained the rock of Israel. From the God of your father he will help you, and with the Almighty he will bless you, with blessings of heavens above, the blessings of the deep lying below, the blessings of father and mother, which is harmony. The blessings of your father surpass the blessings of my parents. The ends of everlasting hills, may they come to Joseph's head and to the crown of the head of the one who was separated from his brothers. Benjamin is a wolf. He will prey in the morning, and he will devour plunder, and in the evening he will divide the spoils. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father spoke to them, and blessed them, each man according to his blessing he blessed them. I can't let this description of Judah pass without comment, because it details some of the most important details of prophecy that will be fulfilled in the end time. Judah is set to become the greatest of tribes in the end time of the age, because salvation and rescue of humanity is through Judah, and his brothers' nations will bow down to him. Jacob died after he had again told them to bury him in the cave of Machpelah. Jacob was 147 years old when God took his soul back to heaven. Here is the scripture that Jacob told them concerning the end of the age. Under the inspiration of God, Jacob elevated the sons of Joseph over his brothers. As the head of the tribes of Joseph was to be prince among his brothers. Genesis 49:22-26. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over the wall. That is an astounding population growth that dwarfs Britain, again showing who is the greater nation. This is the verse that identifies Joseph as the house of Israel, Isaiah 5:7. The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are the garden of his delight, which Judah is the sons of Jerusalem, that is known as Israel today in the Middle East. America is modern-day Israel, and ancient Israel is the kingdom of Judah that we call Israel today. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains and the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. In other words, the head of nations. Note that none attacked Joseph while he was living and ruling in Egypt. So this is a prophecy for the last days, and one that has great meaning, having regards for the identity of the archers. When the rest of the European nations caved under the threats from these barbaric hordes, America remained strong, and there is something else that distinguishes America over Britain. It is the number 13. It is identified with America. Manasseh is mentioned, but Ephraim is identified by both the name of his father Joseph, and Joseph was prince over his brothers, which is why America's seal has the archer's bow and the arrows on it trimmed in gold, symbolizing the 13th tribe of Israel. In terms of the end time or the end of the age prophecy, Manasseh is given little mention, but Ephraim is spoken of again and again in very specific terms. Even though America and Britain are one tribe, Ephraim's older brother Manasseh has faded away over the many generations, while Ephraim has grown stronger. This fulfills Jacob's blessing of the birthright promise of national greatness to be the greatest nation on earth, America that came from his twin brother Manasseh. After we suffer our calamity as a nation, then America will come into her greatness. It has not been fulfilled yet. Jacob gave a brief prophecy for each of his sons, noting that each would be a community of peoples, Genesis 48:4. God actually said that each would become a great nation. Yet Joseph's two sons would be elevated over them. But like Joseph, Ephraim was to be the prince over them all, the head of nations, as in the United Nations on American soil, and Wall Street that does worldwide trading with the nations. When America came into existence, America became the 13th tribe of Israel at that point. The tribe of Ephraim. It's actually Ephraim and Manasseh. At that point, they become ahead of the tribe in the number one position. It would be Ephraim and Manasseh, which is Ephraim, number one. Joseph is second. Reuben, Simon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Benjamin. And this correlates to the dreams that Joseph had, where the bundles bowed down to him and the 11 stars that bowed down to him. So his 11 brothers under him are bowing down to him. It's all symbolic and metaphoric. It's about positioning of the tribes in the end times. And Judah, in the end times, saves the other nations of the house of Israel, which is America and Britain. That is the lineup of the 13th tribes of Israel. Genesis chapter 49 and 48 are the most prophetic chapters that is basically missed by all scholars, Christians, and Jewish rabbis alike. These chapters are the beginning of wisdom and understanding, and you cannot possibly understand the grand finale of this age and to understand the end time prophecies without knowing the tribal nation lineup and who they are, you'd be like a boat at sea with no compass. And I can guarantee you that Lucifer knows the scepter promise and the birthright promise of nations. It is obvious to see Britain, America, and Europe that are being invaded by the Islamic hordes and the refugees and illegals that have come to destroy the countries, not to assimilate. So see, with God, it is all about race. The seed, the descendants of the seed that he made promises to. So if people have a problem with that, they need to take it to the altar. And of course, Lucifer wants you to shut up about race. And don't be a racist, because it is about the seed. Lucifer has to bring down America and Britain to bring in his new world order. He's trying to destroy God's new world order. Ephraim and Manasseh, or Ephraim, the 13th tribe. Ephraim, America, will safeguard his brothers, Britain and Judah. The house of Israel is America, Britain, and Judah, or Israel of today in the Middle East. That is the house of Israel until the end of the age. Ephraim is the head of all tribes and the head of all nations. America, the United States of America. So you can certainly understand why communism and Islam and everything else, liberalism, wants to overthrow America. Even at our worst, we are still the greatest nation on earth. Okay, now, after Jacob died, all of Egypt mourned with Joseph over the passing of Jacob. In the time of his stay in Goshen, he had gained the esteem and love of all the people. Jacob's children fulfilled their promise and carried the coffin all the way to Canaan. When the procession reached the border of Canaan, 31 kings turned out to pay homage to the dead. Esau, too, heard of his brother's death and came to accompany his body to its place of rest. Finally, they reached Hebron and made preparations to bury Jacob in the cave of Machpelah. Esau did not want to give permission to bury Jacob in the cave of Machpelah. He wanted to reserve the place next to his father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham for himself, even though 27 years earlier, when he and Jacob had divided the inheritance of their father. Esau breaks his word again. Fighting broke out between Esau's men and the sons of Jacob, in which 40 of Esau's people were killed. Husham, the son of Dan, who was hard of hearing, had been sitting by the hearse of his dead grandfather. When he finally heard the noise of fighting and observed the delay of the burial, he asked the reason why. He did not understand exactly what had happened. He heard that Esau withheld permission for Jacob's burial, so he took a sword and ran into the camp and slew Esau, and Esau's head fell to the floor, and it was buried in the cave of Machpelah, where his ancestors had found their last rest. His body was taken back to his home in Sur. Joseph forgave his brothers of the past and never spoke of it again, as he promised his father Jacob before he died. Joseph, without a doubt, starts off as being the next greatest hero of Genesis after Abraham, and before long is lost into the pages of the Bible, yet unknown to all but a few today. The greatest of all tribes of Israel, and as predicted some 3,000 years ago, have become the greatest, wealthiest nations of the earth. Nations, not nation. Joseph became 2 nations, and the house of Israel became 13 tribes. Now, since we know that Judah is the Jewish people of today, God said they would not lose their identity because they kept the Sabbath holy and the commandments, and the scepter would never depart them. That is what the promise means, that they would always be identified as God's people that obeys him. So what then became of Joseph? What does the Bible say about this incredible man of God and his descendants? Joseph was Jacob's favorite son, whose jealous brothers sold him into slavery. After years of being a slave in Egypt, he ended up becoming the second most powerful man in the world, next to Pharaoh, next to his father Jacob, and saved the family from starvation. Jacob was reunited with Joseph after 25 years to find out his son was not only alive but a powerful ruler of the greatest nation on earth at the time. Few know this story well, but Jacob actually wrestled with God's angel all night, and God actually allowed Jacob to win the match. Genesis 32:24. It was at this time God changed Jacob's name to Israel, and he said, "You will no longer be called Jacob," which means deceiver, "but from now on you will be called Israel." And Israel literally means he fought with God and won. This is the origin of the name Israel. Now the mystery deepens when Jacob gives his name Israel to Joseph's two sons. Let's talk about the New World, America, or the New World. You know, it's always been considered in its early birthing stages as the New World. America that actually came from or out of England and Europe because of religious suppression and overtaxations and so forth. George Washington, the father of our country, he went to the home of Betsy Ross and drew her a sketch of the Stars and Stripes. This first flag contained 13 stars in a circle, which also represented the 13 colonies. Together with the red, white, and blue stripes, was adopted in Congress on June 14, 1777. The Washington family tree has been traced back to the tribe of Judah. The red, white, and blue of our flag were also the colors of ancient Israel. Red is the color of blood and sacrifice and redemption. White is the color of purity, the color of the garments worn by the Levites and the priests of Israel that was in the service of the sanctuary of God. The blue represents the color of water and the sky and the universe that represents love and devotion. The fringe God commanded his people Israel to wear in the corners of their garments were white with a blue fringe. Numbers 15:37. White represents righteousness, blue represents God in heaven. The veil of God's temple was adorned in the colors of blue, purple, red, and white. 2 Corinthians 3:14, Exodus 26:31. The day the Declaration of Independence was signed, a committee was appointed to design a national seal. On that committee was Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson. They were not satisfied with any drafts that they ever came up with until after the Revolutionary War, which there was involved great suffering and trials and loss of life, and the colonies looked to God and his word for spiritual guidance. So they finally came up with the seal, and it was adopted June 20th, 1782, and that was after the Revolutionary War, which is the same seal that we have today. Both sides of the United States seal has been printed on the $1 bill, allowing us to determine the full measure of the seal. Even though the elites have perverted its meaning with their Illuminati counterfeiting crap to confuse the masses, they have absolutely nothing to do with this seal. When ancient Israel marched out of Egypt under Moses, they marched under the four standards or flags bearing the figure of a lion, the bull, the eagle, and a man. There were 3 tribes under each standard or flag, and they marched or camped in the form of a hollow square positioned around the tabernacle of God, which was at the center of their camp and marching formation. This hollow square was a form of fighting used by the British for years, until the development of high explosives. We read these 4 figures in Ezekiel. The eagle in the American seal has its face turned to the right or westward. It is in full flight, indicating the American march to the western horizon. The motto of early American that was coined by Horace Greeley was "Go West, young man," and the generations did. The eagle is an illustration of God's guardianship over Israel. God brought Israel out of Egypt on eagle wings. Exodus 19:4. The eagle is a symbol for God and his loving protection. The British has 2 of the ancient standards or flags of Israel, the lion and the unicorn or bull. On the front side of the British seal is a lion, symbol of the tribe of Judah, which was to bear the kingship, 1 Chronicles 5:1-2, and the unicorn. The reverse side of the royal seal of British shows the Sphinx of Egypt. The reverse side of the American seal pictures the Great Pyramid. Both of these objects are close to each other in Egypt. Over the breast of the seal of the United States is a shield, the shield of faith. It has 13 stripes, red, white, signifying the number 13, the number of the original American colonies. However, 13 has a deeper meaning. It now represents the 13 tribes of Israel. 13 is the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh that became one tribe, and the head of the tribes or nations. The shield itself reminds us that God is our shield. God said to Abraham, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. Genesis 15:1. The 13 stripes on the shield represents the 13 colonies. The shield is not fastened to the eagle, but spreads in front of it as if held there by the unseen hand of God. In the eagle's beak there is a scroll representing the proclamation of liberty, freedom, and justice for all. The Constitution of the United States is based on the laws of God and the Ten Commandments which God gave to ancient Israel. The motto, E pluribus unum, means one from many, or out of many, or one. The seal does not belong to the counterfeit elites, or the Masons, or the Illuminati. This term represents unity of the 50 states of the United States of America. This one nation combines the people and the ethnic groups of many to mean one. And if we remain faithful to the laws of God, this national unity will be preserved forever. But if we break God's laws, then the very unity we possess will become disunity and division. The unity will become a relic, a shadowed memory, and a distant dream, forgotten in onrushing calamities and chaos. America is a commonwealth of 50 states. Notice that in the eagle's right claw is a clutched olive branch. The olive branch has 13 leaves and 13 olives. Joseph is compared in prophecy to a fruitful branch of an olive tree, Genesis 40:22. In a parable in the book of Judges, we are told that the olive tree is supreme among trees, Judges 9:8. Now the bundles of arrows, Joseph is a fruitful branch by the spring. His branches run over the wall. A charming son is Joseph, a son charming to the eye of the women. He strode along them to see. They heaped bitterness upon him and became quarrelsome. Yeah, archers despised him, but his bow was strongly established, and his arms were guided from the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there he sustained the rock of Israel, from the God of your father, and he will help you. And with the Almighty he will bless you with the blessings of the heavens above, the blessings of the deep lying below, the blessings of father and mother. Genesis 49:22-25. Joseph's Ephraim and Manasseh, which are American Britain, are famous for their military might. Their bow is strong. They are powerful archers. The bow today would symbolize air power and missile power. It was largely the U.S. and the British air power that defeated the alliance in World War II, the Gulf War in Iraq. In shock and awe, the arrow is a symbol of war-making power of guided missiles which attack from the air. The Anglo-Saxons were great, excellent archers. In the eagle's left claw are 13 arrows that represent Ephraim, the 13 tribes, which is both America and Britain, that was added by Jacob before he died, the youngest Ephraim, to be the mightiest nation of the world, the head status of the tribes. This symbolized national readiness and vigilance to fight and to safeguard the truth, liberty, and freedoms which God has given us to enjoy. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of America, once said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." The arrows of the Almighty will protect his people so long as we obey him. But woe unto us if God himself sends his arrows to punish us for our disobedience. Ezekiel 5:16. On the seal of the United States of America, there are 13 olive leaves, 13 olives, 13 arrows, 13 stripes on the shield, 13 letters in El Pluribus Unum, 13 stars above the eagle's head, which is the Star of David. God does not make mistakes. There were 13 original colonies and 13 ships in the original American Navy, with one remaining frigate left today, the USS Constitution, the last of the original 6 frigates of the United States Navy that is still in commission today. On the reverse side of the U.S. seal, there are 13 tiers of stones in the Great Pyramid, which the Masons have made an entire religion based on these truths to confound the wise by counterfeiting its true meaning. Joseph was a prince of Egypt. Judah and the Israelites were enslaved for over 500 years. The capstone of the Great Pyramid of Giza was never finished by the Israelites because Moses took them out of the land of their bondage. All of these things have meaning to Israelites. It is their history, not the elites. They do not want you to know this knowledge. They want to continue to profane it, like everything they do of God. They attach themselves to it, and they counterfeit it, and they blaspheme it, and they profane it. This is how they hide the truth of your identity and the truth of knowledge. The raised capstone with the eye of God symbolizes God's continuous watch and care for his people since leaving their bondage in Egypt. It is not the all-seeing eye of Big Brother that everyone has been programmed to believe by these counterfeiters. God said, "My people perish for the lack of knowledge." Over the eagle's head is a cloud or crest, a glorious scene of the glory of God shining through and breaking up a cloud shining upon 13 stars that symbolize the promise that the Messiah will come from the line of King David, Judah. A glory breaking through a cloud, the pillar of fire, and a cloud of the presence of God that led ancient Israel out of Egypt. Exodus 13:21-22, 14, and 24. This is before Israel adopted the Star of David as their flag, and this is hundreds of years before Israel of today, since 1948, was made a nation. This is why the deep state, elite globalists, whatever you want to call them, wants to remove our currency and our seals because of the meaning behind it that's been here for 241 years, actually longer. The divine glory breaking through the clouds show that it is the power and the glory of God shining upon Israel, which keeps her safe and makes her great and gives her deliverance. So long as we acknowledge our God and his presence and obey his laws, our nation will be great. But if we forget God, then our punishment is assured. Isaiah 1:1-21, Proverbs 1:22-32, and Hosea 4:6-8. The 13 stars in the cloud above the eagle represents 2 truths. The number 13 reveals the 13 tribes of Israel. The scene depicts 11 stars below, bowing down before the highest star, the star of Joseph, of his dream. This was significant in fulfilling Joseph's amazing dream where he said, "Look, and I have had another dream. The sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me, like the 11th bundles bowing down, and the 11 stars, which are the other tribes, Joseph's brothers." But not only that, it also helps you to identify the nation of Israel. When you see all these things that they're telling you in the end times, when Jacob went through it, these are all symbolisms. When you see this in your national seals, you know who you are. And that scripture's in Genesis 37:9 and 10-11. Now, underneath the pyramid seal is the Latin phrase, Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means New World Order. But this refers to the true New World Order, which will be brought to this earth by the Messiah. And if you're a Christian, it will be Yeshua, which is Jesus. He comes in power and glory to establish his kingdom, Shiloh. The fact that this symbol of the capstone hovering over the pyramid, not yet finished, depicts the fact that God's not quite finished here with us on earth until the Messiah comes. Isaiah the prophet speaks of the Great Pyramid. On that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the center of the land of Egypt, and a pillar to the Lord and its borders. It will be a sign and a witness to the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. Isaiah 19:19-20. This prophecy was fulfilled by Moses when taking the children of Israel out of the land of their captivity. The Great Pyramid of Giza, which the hovering capstone with the eye of God as an American seal symbolizes this fact. The elites also know of this prophecy and does everything to confound the truth. If you are awake, you can see the nations that Lucifer are attacking right now in the world. That's America and Britain's having a really rough time, and Israel. We all share the same tragedies with the Islamic terrorism, and we share the same flooding of refugees and illegals. This is called Jacob's trouble. Again, the birthright promise was put upon Ephraim's head, and Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, the youngest, the younger brother, which is, we are the youngest, greatest nation of the world. We are Ephraim. The left hand was upon Manasseh's head, which is the oldest brother that the youngest brother came out of. But they are considered one. They are considered Ephraim. Both America and Britain are considered one tribe, Ephraim, when referring to it in prophecy. These two sons of Joseph were to become two great peoples. The elder Manasseh, a great group of nations, and the younger Ephraim, a great single nation that represents a multitude of nations, as in the United Nations of the world, that trades with the nations of the world on Wall Street. This is the exact promise God promised to Jacob in Genesis 35:10-11. And God said unto him, Thy name shall not be called Jacob any more, but Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come of thee. These two tribes would be called Israel. What a promise. Thank you for tuning in. This is Zeeda Andrews concluding this episode. Be sure to listen to the first and second episode. I cannot possibly explain everything in a few episodes. I will release one a week, and watch out for my next episode on the birthright promise revealed.